There's a pattern of banks and businesses defrauding black churches. One Atlanta pastor has filed a civil lawsuit that names numerous parties who participated in a national predatory lending scheme targeting several black churches throughout the U.S. I talked with Pastor Dewey Smith, pastor of the House of Hope in Atlanta, about this issue. So, Pastor Smith, tell me about this initiative as relates to these churches. And first of all, let's walk through the problem. You're laying out that the churches are being targeted when it comes to predatory lending?
Yes, sir. You know, there's a financial instrument called bond transactions, where bond companies purportedly sell bonds to investors privately, and then they hire a local bank to be responsible for receiving the payments from the borrower, and then making interest payments and keeping a ledger of the people who supposedly purchased bonds. And so in 2004, campus we currently own now was refinanced through bonds. Bishop Earl Polk was the pastor of the Cathedral of the Holy Spirit. And we purchased the campus in 2009, but the purchase was contingent upon us assuming their bond transaction, which was the only way we could assume it. And now we've discovered recently, after paying $17 million in 13 years, that the bonds were never sold in 2004, licensed, registered, or authenticated. And we've also discovered recently, we only found out because the vice president of the bank in Amarillo, Texas, was fired and banned from banking permanently by the Texas Department of Banking. And then we've heard from other churches, one in Florida and one in Raleigh, North Carolina, who've lost their properties, that those transactions were never officially done. And so bond transactions have been a major issue for churches for years, but it seems as if African-American churches are being targeted.
And so I guess what jumps out here, and a lot of this has to do with expertise, has to do with not really understanding these financial instruments. And then what happens is having trusted voices come to them and assuring them everything is okay. And then folks go, okay, well, I trust this person. They're a Christian, they're a member, or they may be a fellow pastor. So let's go with it.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. In our case dealt with forgery of the initial documents. And so there's a RICO charge against the bank, the bond company, about 20 defendants in our case. I mean, theft by deception, theft by forgery, racketeer, influence, corrupt organizations. So ours is a little more intense. But in a case like Dr. H. Beecher Hicks, who was one of my mentors growing up, Metropolitan Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., they had a similar issue with the bond company. And I'm not sure was malfeasance involved, but I do know that the instrument is incredibly tricky. And if you don't have a bond attorney and people who have the correct expertise in it, then it could lead to some very adverse consequences. So sometimes it is a matter of not having the right people aboard, but then sometimes the documents can be forged and misplaced and swapped out at closing. And so it can be very, very tricky. And it's gotten the best people, from Enron to Michael Milken to athletes. It happens all the time with investors.
Have you lined up bond experts to say to any church, hey, if anyone approaches you or you're considering this, use these people. We've already vetted them. They know what's going on.
Absolutely. And we've been in contact with the NAACP and, of course, the SCLC and a few other organizations to kind of put together a conference and put together a checklist. So when it happens, we would know what to do. But what is also interesting is that most of the bond companies are now all of a sudden leaving the bond industry. We've received a myriad of calls from other bond companies who are not involved, trying to negotiate this, come to some type of settlement, because it's a real stain on the industry. And so we want to do all we can to empower people, and also encourage some to even consider doing a class action lawsuit. But there are a few companies that have a history of doing this to churches, particularly African-American churches, and we want to just put all the information out there so they can go back through the documents and even talk to the SEC, because the bond company that we're involved with, the license was terminated by the SEC. They were banned and expelled by FINRA. Also, they were sanctioned by the FDIC. And so a lot of this information we should have known a few years ago when the sanctions happened, but those federal agencies never reach out to the people who've been harmed by it to let them know that malfeasance has taken place. So I think there's some culpability there as well with the federal agencies for not sharing information.
You know, I think back to, there's so many stories. I think back to Pastor Kirby John Caldwell, what happened there with those Chinese bonds, and he's now in federal prison. I think back to, and to your point, this can be devastating because folks have lost churches. You mentioned Pastor H. Beecher Hicks, and one of the things that, of course, they eventually left that location and then moved out to Largo, Maryland. And it's devastating because you have people who have given, who have tithed, who have had offerings, and this is Black-owned property, and then all of a sudden it's gone because of one of these things.
Absolutely, it's tragic because I think a lot of times it's predatory in the sense that sometimes traditional loans, when banks were kind of pulling away from lending to churches, you can get more money, and the underwriting process is a little easier in terms of bond transactions. And so sometimes, people get up in situations where you bite off more than you can chew. They have all types of covenants and restrictions within the bond indentures where they can call the loan in at any time. And so it just can create a plethora of problems, and it's heartbreaking to see it happening. And I just, we assumed that ours was legitimate. We assumed that with the bond transaction and the indenture was solid, and it had been in place for 5 years. And I look back now to ask ourselves, and our team has, because we had two attorneys involved in the initial transaction, but there was no way we could have caught forged documents at that time. And so it just, now we know what to ask for, and we just want to share that. And we're encouraging a few other churches to institute a class action lawsuit. One church is the African church that's in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the other church is in Orlando, Florida. They lost the building, and now they're having to rent the building back from the people who foreclosed on them.
Wow.
Lost everything. It's just, it's sick, and it's evil, it's diabolic, and it's predatory.
And this is, one of the things that I've done a number of commentaries, and I was talking about HBCUs and contracts and expertise. And I've really said this about a lot of our Black institutions, that when we are moving in areas that is out of the norm, it really is vital to have subject matter expertise. So you can have an attorney, but the question is that their particular expertise? There are real estate attorneys. There are tax attorneys. There are, as you said, there are bond attorneys. And I think a lot of times, a lot of us just assume that, well, a so-and-so can handle this when in fact they can. Reverend Floyd Flake also told me once, he said, hey, when we first started doing deals, with banks, he said, I would bring I would bring various deacons. He said, when we started doing transactions that were 20, 30, 40, $50 million, he said, I needed folk on my side of the table who spoke the exact same language as people on the other side of the table, so they understood, we knew what was going on. And so that expertise is so vital, and it's going to cost you, but it's going to cost you a lot more if you don't have the expertise on the front end.
It's funny you mentioned HBCUs, because I found out that the bank that's involved in this situation with us, who's been trying to resolve it actually, the best up to their ability, they're actually one of the banks for Shaw University there in North Carolina now. And it just made me wonder, I know it's a different type of lending and that ours is a bond transaction, but the fact that they handle, I think, a lot of the student loans for Shaw University. And it just made me wonder, are those things above board as well? Because this bank has a history of issues and a history of malfeasance, where the president and the vice president both have been fired from the bank in the past few years. And so it just made me wonder again, are all the I's been dotted and T's been crossed? We have an HBCU renaissance, which is a beautiful thing, But you're exactly correct. If we don't have the expertise at the table, to people who know the lingo, know the tricks, and that would have the protection there, because we didn't have a bond attorney. We had a transactional attorney and a real estate attorney who were very, very solid. And again, there's no way they could have caught forgery. So I will say that. But there are a few other things now that we know that they could have looked for that could have possibly brought us to this conclusion sooner. But ours was a very, very tricky and deviant transaction and criminal. And so ours was a little different. But again, you have to have the right people in place who know how to ask the right questions. So
moving forward with this national effort, what is it going to look like? And then what are y'all planning on, traveling the country? You're looking at having webinars, really, how are you going to be, frankly, teaching and educating other churches and pastors about this very issue?
That's a great question. We're looking to have our first webinar in January. And we have one of the gurus in terms of church finance, a guy whose name is Ken Lewis of CH Advisory Group. Met him 10 years ago at a conference, at one of Bishop Jake's conferences, and he's been probably one of the leading guys in terms of banking and loan underwriting for churches, with the familiarity and a dexterity with traditional loans and bond transactions. So we brought him in and a couple other bond attorneys, one of the best bond attorneys in the nation, who's done it for about 38 years. And so just to help people kind of vet through it, to give a checklist. And so we look to have quarterly meetings. I'm hoping that Bishop Jakes has his conference in May of next year, 2023, and hopefully we have some opportunities to have some discussion there as well, and a few other pastors' conferences throughout the year. And so we just want to put together and try to get the information out there, because I do think by having a checklist and people that you can talk to, and having the right understanding of state law, because that would be helpful as well. So,
and I think that list is important. I mean, as you were talking, I thought about the NFL Players Association and how they have, like for us, even the NFL, here are these certified agents, and then the Players Association has been very helpful in providing people with reputable financial advisors and others, because sort of the same thing, how players have been taken financially, and it's like, man, I didn't know so-and-so was screwing with different people like that. But being able to say, hey, here are people who have been vetted, who are trusted. And so if you're looking for it, here's sort of a list of people who you can call from.
Roland, one of the big, let me thank you for this opportunity, first of all, and all you've done and all that you do for us. But one of the biggest problems in the African American church is we don't talk.
Yep.
And it's like we are just on our islands by ourselves, and everybody's doing their own thing for whatever reasons. And the lack of collaboration and lack of communication amongst us is the main thing that's keeping us from really getting some traction. So everybody's a Lone Ranger, and if we share our struggles and share our stories, rather than everybody just in their own corners, having ecclesiastical urinating contests, I think it'll help us to really just, hey man, this is what I've gone through. This is what I did. Here's the mistake I made. Here's how I bumped my head. Who are the people in your ministry? What did you do wrong? Avoid this, that, because a lot of these things could have been avoided. I just found out that the same bond company in Atlanta screwed over a church dating back to the 90s. A church I used to preach for when I was in college. Same situation, same issue, same bishop connected that church in the 90s to these people, and and that church had issues that they finally resolved, but no conversation.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to ego. In terms of, when I say ego, what I mean by that is, it's like, well, I don't want our business to be out. I didn't want folks to understand. But the reality is, you're helping somebody else not get trapped, not get caught. I mean, for me, it just, if I'm rolling with somebody and I know they are shady, my deal is I'm telling everybody. I'm telling everybody, don't do nothing. And again, it ain't got nothing to do with, they're a frat brother or no. If they shady and no good, no.
It's so true. I mean, I think you're right. It's like, and the inability, and it is ego to the sense that, hey, man, I screwed up. This is what I could have done differently. In my case, we had the people the real estate company did an appraisal. Well, they used a 5-year-old appraisal on the property in 2009 when the economy had tanked. They put a new cover sheet to make the 2004 appraisal like it was 2009 appraisal. Well, I accepted it at face value. Well, it's forgery now, but at the end of the day, I should have done my own appraisal. You know what I mean? So things that I should have had my own bond attorney. So things like that. They told us they had search certificates of occupancy. They provided us with documentation of that. Only found out that was forged as well. So things that I could have looked for and things I saw, I bumped my head. So it's like, I just stand before the church, say, hey, this is what happened, church. Here are the facts. Let the attorneys talk. Here's our board of directors. Here's what we are. Here's what we did. We bumped our heads. Here's what we spent. Here's what we're going after. And just once I got that off of my chest, now I don't have to be embarrassed or ashamed.
Right.
What was right, and be transparent with the people. And so I think we got to do the same with each other. But we act as if we got all the answers. And sometimes I think the other piece for pastors is, as you said about Pastor Flakes, listen, most of us, we preach and we teach. We're not attorneys. We're not CPAs. We're not accountants. We're not contractors. So, man, how are we going to lead a building project of $20 million and we've never built a doghouse? I mean, so surround yourself with people. It doesn't make you weak because you don't have the expertise around you.
Well, absolutely. So this is great. If somebody is looking for information, want to find out more, who do they call, their website, who do they reach out to?
Yeah, they can send me a message on edeweysmith.org, and we'll send it to the appropriate people. Kenneth Lewis of CH Advisory Group is leading our charge, along with Derek Williams and a few others. And so I have a good team who's going to be leading this process. And of course, we've already contacted the NAACP and a few others who's going to be up front as well. And so just send me a message, edeweysmith.org, and we'll get the information out and look forward to our first webinar in January.
All right. Pastor Smith, we certainly appreciate it. And hopefully folks will heed the message and then reach out to you and really take advantage of the learning opportunity because, what we don't want to see are our institutions fading away because of shenanigans.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity, man. Keep doing what you're doing. You're an inspiration to us all.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.